sharing because I am excited to introduce Shanelle Pierce to you. Shanelle Pierce completed a program on creating collaborative solutions at the Harvard John F. Kennedy School of Government. She is an executive MBA graduate from the University of Washington, Foster School of Business, and has her Lean Six Sigma Green Belt. She is a recipient of the Visionary Award, recognized as a brilliant innovator and visionary leader by the Interagency Committee of State Employed Women. She is a volunteer academic scholarship reviewer for the Washington State Employee Credit Union. Take it away, Shanelle.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jeannie, for your introduction. Hello and welcome, everybody. Thank you to each and every one of you for attending this session. It is my intention that everyone listening receives at least one small insight, an inspiration, or an idea of what you will do differently from having attended this session today. For those in the audience who may be visually impaired, I'm a white woman with long brown hair, wearing glasses with black frames, and a light blue blazer. I use she, her pronouns. I'm an employee of Washington State and work as the Deputy Director for the Governor's Office for Regulatory Innovation and Assistance, and my name is Shanelle Pierce. Here's today's agenda flow. We began with the introduction from Results Washington. We will now transition to reviewing slide content, where we'll spend roughly 2/3 of our time, and we'll close out this session with about 10 minutes of questions and answers. This slide shows a comic strip, a Dilbert comic strip. In the comic strip, Dilbert's colleague, with a cup of coffee in hand, approaches Dilbert and says, "I got promoted to a leadership role. It means I get to tell people to work hard, but I don't have to do any work myself." Dilbert says, "That doesn't sound right." Dilbert's colleague says, "I could use a fresh one of these," and holds his coffee cup out towards Dilbert. Well, you know how a comic strip can be funny? I'm just curious how many of you personally know or have known a leader like this? I just found out that the live polling tool is ready to go. The poll is anonymous. Instead of a show of hands, would it be okay if you answer yes or no to the question that's popping up on your screen now? The question is, do you know of a leader like the one in the Dilbert comic strip? I will pause now so you can answer the poll. The poll results indicate that over 76% of today's audience know of at least one leader who at one time or another has used their power to their own end. In 2017, I completed a program on creating collaborative solutions at the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University. That is me in the yellow frame. I learned many things from many professors while at the Harvard Kennedy School. Today, I'm going to share with you what I learned from one professor named Julie Badalana. This slide shows a picture of Mother Teresa, Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King Jr., Nelson Mandela, and Gandhi. The Harvard Kennedy School taught me that if you cultivate humility and empathy, then you're more likely to see power as a responsibility, and not to use power just to pursue a means to your own end, like the manager in the Dilbert comic strip did. Secret number one, your sources of power aren't limited to a job title. You do not need authority to have power. The Harvard Kennedy School taught me what matters is where power comes from. For example, we all have personal sources of power based on our individual attributes and skills. We all have things like our specific expertise, our education, our leadership skills, our sweat and hard work, or our charisma. We may or may not have positional sources of power, which are based on formal roles held in organizations and society. But we all do have relational sources of power, which are based on our relationships with others. Professor Badalana found that persons who are central in their informal network of an organization have a clear advantage, regardless of their position in the formal hierarchy. Let's think about that a bit. Who are the most effective innovators or change makers you know? They are those people who other people go to for advice. They have a huge advantage because people trust them. They don't have a certain job title. They don't have to be at the top of the organizational chart or even in the middle of it. That is because other people tend to trust them and go to them for advice. Consider, you can overcome the limits of your formal rank or authority with your informal connections. Be aware, too, that if you're high in the hierarchy, do not rest on your laurels. Your informal connections still matter. Secret number 2, your informal network matters regardless of your position in the traditional organizational hierarchy. Persons who are central in their informal network of an organization have a clear advantage regardless of their position on an org chart. What is more effective, your formal authority or your informal network of relationships? Be cautious about using an org chart to identify who has power and who does not. The org chart is going to tell you who has authority, but authority is different from power. Authority is a formal right to assign tasks or give instructions or assignments. And yes, for sure, in some organizations, that can no doubt be a major source of power. Let's take some time now to think about who you are connected to. If you're able, please grab something to write with and something to write on. If you prefer to type, that is okay too. Either way, please get a blank page ready. I'm going to pause now so you can do that. The idea of this exercise is to look back over the last 2 to 3 years and answer a few diagnostic questions. So let's begin the exercise. In thinking back over the last 2 to 3 years, the first diagnostic question is, who do you discuss significant work-related matters with? I will pause now so you can write down the names of the people that come to mind. The next question is, who has been the most supportive to you in getting your job done? I will pause now so you can write down the names of the people that come to mind. Next, who have you supported in their efforts to get their job done? Next, list those people you've contributed meaningfully to your professional development. List those people you have contributed meaningfully to their professional development. Finally, list those people you have noticed come to you for advice. Guess what? The names you wrote down are your informal network. Let's take some time now to think about who else you want to be connected to. Let's begin by you asking yourself some additional diagnostic questions. First, who do you admire for how they've advanced their career? Next, list those people you notice that others go to for advice. Finally, list anyone you do not yet professionally know, but would like to know. By the way, this slide deck is available with the session materials on the Results Washington website, so you can go back through this exercise again later. If you want to grow your informal network, one way to start is to select someone you wrote down on your list and invite them for coffee or lunch. In advance of your networking connection, prepare a short list of the questions about the innovation or change you want to make. Pick a theme and approach the conversation with the intention to explore ideas. It can help your exploration if you think broadly about what you could potentially give. It's also a good idea to approach the conversation with curiosity, a focus on learning, and active listening. Be sure to ask each new connection during your coffee or lunch conversation, whom do you know who you think I should also meet with? Their answer will inform who to connect with next, and then repeat the same process again and again. I've shared with you just one networking approach. There are many approaches, so I encourage you to find a method that works for you. Just remember that your approach can make or break the trust in your relationships, so be authentic and find a networking approach that also matches your personality. I want to now share with you about my story of how I grew my informal network when I returned from the Harvard Kennedy School in 2017. At that time, I had been in state service for 10 years, and I was not receiving the level of support I needed coming up through the ranks. So I began by asking myself those same diagnostic questions. Looking back over the last 2 to 3 years, I made a list of all the people I was connected to. I selected one name from the list and asked them to meet for coffee. I picked a theme to explore ideas that created public value. At the end of the conversation, I asked, whom do you know who you think I should also meet with? They gave me a name, and I repeated this process again and again with dozens of public servants from across the state government. Along the way, I got inspired. I found out that others were also not receiving the level of support they needed as emerging leaders. As I pondered where to go next, secret number 3 came to mind. Secret number 3, the Harvard Kennedy School taught me that if your sources of power are not right for the innovation or change that you want to make, then you will need to team up with others. During that time, I had joined the Interagency Committee of State Employed Women. I had wanted to expand my informal network and had always been interested in what the committee does, so I joined. This is a picture of the committee posing with Governor Inslee in 2018. That is me in the yellow frame. Before I talk more about what came from teaming up with the Interagency Committee of State Employed Women, I want to share with you a bit about the statewide business resource groups. BRGs, as they are affectionately known, can be a terrific way to expand your informal network. Depicted on this slide are the logos for every BRG. Starting from the top left is the Latino Leadership Network, the Disability Inclusion Network, Blacks United in Leadership and Diversity Build, the Washington Immigrant Network, the Veterans Employee Resource Group, VERG, the Rainbow Alliance and Inclusion Network, RAIN, and the newest BRG, Hawaiians, Asians, and Pacific Islanders Promoting an Empowerment Network, HAPPEN. BRGs are all about bringing people and their allies together to share common interest, which could be a perfect fit to team up on an innovation or change that you want to make. I included a handout that has information about the BRGs with the session materials. The handout lists their websites so you can learn more about each group. When you visit their websites, you'll find a place to view community events and to subscribe to their mailing lists. The Interagency Committee of State Employed Women, while it is not technically a business resource group, is considered part of the BRG family. Now back to my story. In 2019, in collaboration with the Interagency Committee of State Employed Women, my informal network, and other partners, I launched a pilot program. I called the pilot program the Enterprise Innovators Circle. The goal of the pilot program was to experiment with how to help emerging leaders receive more support. We came together in a psychologically safe space to navigate the challenges of being leaders. We met once a month for 1.5 hours, and we met for 7 months. From the start, I gave the group a new identity as innovators. The identity as innovators gave us a shared identity as co-creators for positive change. At the meetings, there was a supportive environment to dialogue and share what you knew and valued, as well as what you needed to know and wanted to understand. This created a community of learning. To keep innovators engaged, I had them rotate to lead different portions of each meeting. During those 7 months, we all grew in our leadership abilities to become better leaders. We also grew our informal networks. After several months together, innovators began to share that other leaders were seeing a noticeable change in them, and they attributed this to the Innovators Circle. In the words of one innovator, he experienced the Innovators Circle as a space to come fill my cup back up and openly share his challenges as a leader. He reported experiencing a positive impact every month in a small amount of time, which led to implementing ideas in his department. He was inspired to create a Speak Your Truth space, a space for department employees to come, share stories, connect, and collaborate. That innovator was Philip White. He is currently the Assistant Commissioner of Administrative Services at the Employment Security Department. Some innovators interacted in other capacities at work. One innovator recalled the time she received a head nod from another innovator in the audience during a governor's task force meeting. The head nod signaled to her fellow innovator that was okay to speak truth to power, and so she did. She later shared this story with the group and said that she felt as though I had wind under my wings because I had people at the table who had my back. That innovator was Dr. Karen Johnson. She is currently the director of the Washington State Office of Equity, and here she is in a pre-recorded video to share this experience in her own words.
Now that was a moment to remember. I was serving as the Washington State Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion representative on the Office of Equity Task Force and found myself in robust conversations with other task force members about virtually everything. I am an introvert, and the conversations were exhausting and very necessary. Now, during this particular meeting, I was asking myself, do I have the energy to say another word? You see, I was feeling the weight of the pressure to show up in this space as my unapologetic self, because having the opportunity to weigh in on recommendations for the first statewide Office of Equity was an opportunity to seize and not waste. As I was having this internal dialogue, I happened to look around the room and caught the eye of another innovator in the room, Ayanna Coleman. In that split second, she gave me the nod, an almost imperceptible lowering of the head toward another Black person you might encounter on your travels through, say, Slovakia or Finland or Olympia, Washington. Yet in that moment, the nod meant to me, I see you, I feel you, I am here for you. Go for it. Dr. J, you must say it. Too many of us are depending on you. I felt like Ayanna gave me the wind under my wings to say what needed to be said in that moment. And what does the Innovators Circle mean to me now? As the very first director of the Washington State Office of Equity, located in the office of the governor, I want other emerging leaders to have the same opportunity to build lasting, trusting friendships with innovators who will support you, encourage you, and walk with you on your leadership path. I am grateful and thankful for the friends I made in our Innovator Circle and want this legacy to continue.
Dr. Johnson mentions her fellow innovator, Ayanna Coleman. Here is what Ayanna had to say about the greatest value she received being a part of the Innovators Circle. The greatest value I have received was to participate in a group where we discussed challenges in hiring and promoting people of color, authentically discussed barriers to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and shared our learning and experience in leadership, which is different from management. Ayanna is currently the Director of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion at the Employment Security Department. And here she is in a pre-recorded audio to share how the Innovator Circle has impacted her journey to her current role in 2022.
My experience with the Innovative Circle did impact my journey in that it greatly boosted my confidence in my ability to lead teams and work within a system of leaders and other state employees who could support me and my work. When I think about leadership in state government, I think about all of the people it takes to serve the public in the way people deserve to be treated. When the role I currently am in came about, I knew I had what it takes to be at this place, at this time, to lead here. I may not have felt ready to take this on if it were not for the people within the Innovative Circle and the time we've spent together to invest in our skills and abilities as current and future leaders.
Please flash back now with me to 2019. Ayanna at that time also said about the Innovators Circle, she felt that everyone belonged and I could feel bold, fearless, and qualified. and that for a change, I didn't stand out because of my race. I believe there has to be a broader impact for more people to feel that way. Ayana is absolutely correct. How can we all contribute to a broader impact for more people to feel bold, fearless, and qualified, no matter their race? A theme that kept emerging during the Innovator Circles meetings was around people of color facing significant challenges in promotional opportunities because of implicit bias woven throughout the hiring process. The group collectively desired to explore how to make the hiring process genuinely fair. I'm curious, how can we all seek to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, in the state government? My professor of business ethics at the University of Washington Foster School of Business taught me that DEI is a cultural issue. It is a wall created by countless bricks, such as the organizational chart, power structures in and outside of the organization, the hiring and firing policies, the reward and punishment systems, symbols around the office, and stories told around the water cooler. On this slide is a comic strip. In the scene are 5 middle-aged white men, all with similar beards and wearing the same green sweater and glasses with orange frames. 4 of the men are seated around a conference room table. One of the men is standing and he asks, "Why don't we have any fresh ideas around here?" I suggest that if you don't like your DEI wall, to harness the power of your informal network to change it. Use your informal network to connect with others. Connect with the intention to explore ideas about how to adjust some of those bricks. You can be the change. If you're interested in learning more about the pilot program, in 2020, I wrote a white paper. It is available with the session materials on the Results Washington website. These are the sources that I used to create this presentation. I wish to express my gratitude to Professor Badalina for teaching me about the power of informal networks. I would like to thank my informal network for your support on this presentation. Specifically, thank you, Ayana, Mike, Dr. Johnson, and Phil. I also want to give a shout out to Sarah Talib for attending today. She and I participated in the Harvard Kennedy School program together in 2017, and she joins us today from Dubai. Lastly, I'd like to thank my boss for saying yes, absolutely, when I asked to submit a proposal to present at this conference. Here's how to connect with me.
All right, question time now. We do have a couple of questions in the chat. So this one is a really thoughtful question here. So the question is, when you said that title is not related to power, it made me curious. I wonder if by communicating to others one's place in an org chart or one's typified job role, titles limit or forward access to the ability to take actions that come with authority. For example, in the application to join the community of practice, 3 of the questions were specifically related to title and credentials. That is interesting to me when we are having conversations around moving through relationships and influencers. I'm curious about what you or others think about what clear titles communicate about hierarchy and positionality, and how titles might be conduits toward barriers to power and authority?
That is a very thoughtful question, no doubt. I'm going to circle back to the concept around the difference between power and authority. So a formal title is going to be more about authority. It's the authority you have to assign tasks, to assign people to do things, to give instructions, to give directions. And this isn't that one is less valuable than the other. I consider it to be like your toolkit. So we definitely need formal authority to get things done. But there are times that authority is not the same as power. It can be used as power in some organizations, and I think that's a bit of what I hear described in the question. But there are other times where if you don't have the trust and respect of others and people look to you for advice, then your authority may not be as powerful in that sense because you have a job title. And so just introducing the idea in this presentation of power is different. And when someone is, no matter where they fall in that org chart, in the middle of it, at the top of it, at the bottom of it, doesn't matter. If people look to them and consider them part of their informal network and trust them and go to them for advice, that is something untapped, perhaps, if we're not aware of it, to understand can really be used for good. And I'm not too sure if I answered the question because it was a quite dynamic question.
Thank you. We have a couple of questions along the same theme, so I'm going to combine them.
Okay.
So we have a couple of questions about what do you do if there's no BRG that you fit into? And specifically, what do you do if a one-on-one conversation or business resource group doesn't fit with a particular disability you might have, for example, autism? How do you proceed then?
Awesome question. As far as I know, the history of the BRGs began with somebody or a group of people having the desire and wanting to make that change, wanting to innovate and start it. So to whoever that has asked this question, be encouraged that you can be the change and start that. And I'd recommend using some of the steps today. Reach out to someone who is on your list of your informal network currently or that you would like to talk to. Happy if you want to reach out to me, send me an email, and I can find a way through my informal network of who to connect with you next to start the process of potentially starting a BRG specifically. That's exactly how they were born out of, right? There's a need. There wasn't a group out there to support that particular group of people and that need for them. And that's how it began with the question that you asked today.
Thank you. So another question we have is, how do you recommend dealing with exclusionary behaviors for communities of practice?
I recommend the steps today, and this process might be a way to explore if it fits you and your personality. You know, if you know someone in your informal network or that you see in that community of practice that you're like, gosh, I think it bothers them too, meet with them in a way that's comfortable to you. I'm recommending lunch or coffee and feel them out. Ask them open-ended questions, go to the conversation curious, and you might find, as I did in my exploration, that others were feeling the same way that I was. And then follow that path, let the momentum build around it and see where it takes you. Again, the idea of today is that there's sometimes that formal authority can't make that change. There's just barriers to it. And the way to get the change in this particular scenario might be through that informal network of people that can make the influence to remove that barrier from communities of practice.
Thank you. Here's a good one about the challenges with remote working. So what do you suggest for someone in a small unit with colleagues scattered around the state and all of us working remotely? I do not have a lot of exposure to even see what others in my agency outside of my unit are doing, much less how they got there. Virtual working makes it harder to see outside my unit to consider other possibilities. I wouldn't even know who to approach for networking.
Would know who to approach for what? For a networking?
Mhm.
Okay, well, whoever that is, you can send me an email and I'll be your first informal connection if you'd like that. And I'm gonna, at the end of the conversation, if you ask me, I'll give you the name of someone that will be appropriate based on our conversation for you to reach out and try to connect with. And I recommend having the courage to do that. Definitely can be isolating, working from home. That's where I was in 2017, just realizing, hey, this isn't supporting me, what I've got right around me in my formal work environment of who's part of it and the structure of it. And so it took a bit of courage to say, I'm going to structure these ideas and I'm just going to go for it, because I needed to meet my own need of what you just described in your question. Similar needs, right? Not being met and just not knowing. For the longest time, I had waited for someone to do it for me. And it was like, that wasn't going to happen after 10 years. So I had to be the change and figure out how to do it myself. And I do think it can be as easy as having the courage, being structured about it, and just starting with the one, and it can snowball itself into something greater.
Thank you.
And I just want to add to that, part of what I've learned through this process too, in the last several years going through it, is that it may not be that we should have all our needs met by our colleagues that are right around us. There was such rich diversity in bringing folks, and that was part of the magic of the Innovators Circle, is it connected people that may not have met otherwise from all kinds of different agencies from across the enterprise. And so that diversity of thought, the diversity of what they do in their work every day, who they were as diverse people and backgrounds from different cultures, is very enriching, and is the invitation to think about, maybe it's not meant to be met all in our current work environment, but to find ways to expand beyond it can bring so enriching that then helps us to feel more fulfilled in our current environment, because we're not looking to it to meet all those needs.
We have a personal question for you.
Mhm.
The question is, was your time at the Kennedy School concurrent with your state service? And how did you accomplish your work there?
It was concurrent with my state service, and it was an in-person program pre-pandemic in 2017. And the program is a matter of days. It was at the Harvard Kennedy School on the Harvard University campus in Boston, Massachusetts. It was considered part of my professional development.
That's amazing. Thank you. So we have a question here. I've had many mentorship relationships with people who I'd like to build my informal network with, but I've struggled with keeping the connection going past the mentorship program. Do you have any suggestions or tricks for how to keep those mentorship relationships, especially when the mentor's work doesn't directly interact with the mentee's work?
Well, first of all, I'm excited to know that whoever this is, that you were able to get some mentee relationships, because back at that time when I was searching for it, I wasn't able to find them. So I'm glad to hear that whatever's going on and whatever organization you're in, that you've had that opportunity. And without knowing more details, I'm wondering if maybe those were more part of, your agency, and so they were very formal. And if that's the case, I want to reiterate this idea about this power of the informal. And that was part of what I took from what I learned at Harvard Kennedy School to put into the design of the Innovators Circle, of why it was so effective and has had this lasting impact between the folks that were part of the pilot program. It's that informal piece that really worked. And I can only answer this because I can't converse with whoever asked this, but it was part of what made it so dynamic for the folks that participated, because I looked for people who people tend to trust and go to for advice. They didn't have to have that certain job title. They weren't necessarily the top of the organizational chart or in the middle of it. They had diverse cultures and backgrounds. And really the biggest thing I wanted from the folks that were invited to be a part of the pilot was, I needed to know that they could seek to understand the motivations of different individuals. They respected the views of others. They showed empathy and humility. And so I think when you have people that have that, they're going to tend to form something very genuine, which we all did. And that's the kind of ingredients that made something lasting. And I'm not too sure whether that was there, those kind of ingredients in your mentee experiences to this point.
So we've had a request. Could you go back a slide with your contact information?
Sure.
And then your fellow innovator colleague, Mike Fay, says, talk about how you went about starting your networking group.
Well, first of all, shout out to Mike. I'd like to give him a shout out. When it came out from you all at Results Washington this July or into June, whenever it was, to say, hey, put your proposals in for the Lean conference, something in me kind of was interested about it, but I was shy, as we all are, and wondering if there was any value in something I had to share. And so I know that Mike has presented in the past. And so I had said, hey, Mike, are you going to present this year? And he said, no, we did the other year. But then he was like, hey, if you want to do something together, I'd be up for it. And that's all I needed. Not that any of us need any type of permission, but it gave me permission to be like, really explore, hey, I do have something I want to share. And so thank you, Mike, for being a part in that way. And I don't even think you know that you did that. Thank you for that. So the question is, how did I start the group? Or I'm not.
Start the networking group.
Networking group. Oh, Mike, you got to tell me more. I think I just went through all of that. I picked folks, like I talked about a little bit earlier. I had met them through my informal networking connections across state government to grow my informal network. And I didn't realize till later, because it's not like I had this idea. It's something that grew and had this snowball effect of momentum along the way, when I found that there were more and more people that were not receiving the level of support they needed. And I could see that they were emerging leaders too. But again, it goes back to, it needed to be people. And I didn't realize I'd kind of been interviewing them as I'm having these informal networkings when I had this idea later. Okay, so maybe this answers your question, Mike. Through that exploration, I got inspired. And so I came up with a one-page value proposition, which ended up being called the Enterprise Innovator Circle, about what it would look like to bring a group of people together, to explore having more support for each other as emerging leaders. And even then, I went and shopped around my value proposition, trying to find somebody to act as this authorizer to say, yeah, we'll do, this is great, let's make it happen. And I was finding that everyone I talked to affirmed, hey, this is a great idea, but I couldn't just make it happen. I have my formal authority and my formal role, and this is outside of it, and it doesn't fit in my formal authority or role. It needed someone to authorize it. And so I went back to who was at the time the Chief Learning Officer for the state of Washington, and she had heard my value proposition and liked it. And she had been a mentor to me for probably a year on and off at that point. And so I just asked her, will you support this through your formal authority as a Chief Learning Officer as a pilot program so we can try this out? And she said yes. And so that's what was needed to really give this thing a go. And I hope that answers your question, Mike, because I'm not reading your mind right now.
He said it did. Thank you very much.
Good. Thanks, Mike.
All right. Yeah. Okay. So let me see. A lot of comments in here, Shanelle, about what a great presentation this has been.
Thank you.
One question is, would you be willing to share your value proposition with us?
Sure. Whoever that was, send me an email and I'll send it back to you.
Okay. Well, I'm not seeing any other big questions. I do believe I heard you say that if somebody is really struggling to figure out who to connect with, that they can contact you and you'll be able to kind of help them through that. There was a couple of things in here regarding that. And one person who really wanted to thank the ASL interpreter. Thank you guys so much for this. So Again, thank you, Shanelle. This was a great session. I know I learned a lot and a lot of engagement from those participating. Thank you guys as well. We had over 700 participants today. I know you didn't want to know until the end.